strategic prospects of Ukraine in international cultural relations. So I would like to invite Guillaume Aubert, director of the French Institute in Ukraine, Olha Bregman, Ukrainian film producer, Sanjoy Roy, director of Teamwork Arts from India. He will join us online. Katalin Tünde, head of the Department for the Organization of Cultural and Scientific Events Abroad from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Austria. Ms. Katalin will join us online as well, and Pavel Potorochin, diplomat, writer, and director of the Adam Mickiewicz Institute from 2008 to 2016 from Poland, who will join us online as well. Ms. Tatiana, please. Thank you very much. Actually, this will be the last panel discussion for today, and we will also talk about long-term stories, long-term prospects of Ukraine in international relations. Very often when we talk about cultural diplomacy, we imagine one-time events, some festivals, some visible formats, something which is later described in news outlets, but actually we keep repeating that cultural diplomacy is something long-term. It's a long-term investment which requires a lot of time, because through cultural diplomacy we try to build trust, understanding, and these things require time to bring results.
Moreover, we're interested in stable results. We want for Ukraine to always be part of international talks and any international processes. So what do we need to do, and what the world needs to do for Ukraine in a long run, in a long-term perspective, to become a stable participant of those processes? And so, first, my question I would like to pose to Olga, and my question would be about movie and movie industry, cinema industry. Olga, so when we talk about where we see Ukrainian cinema in 10 years from now, so what Ukrainian cinema can achieve in 10 years perspective from now, and what we need to do for that? Good day, dear colleagues. It's my pleasure to talk for such a respectable, distinguished audience, especially the audience to whom our thoughts could find the practical manifestation and be reflected in your activity, your professional activity. When we talk about cinema, and many will agree with me, the cinema is one of the most powerful instruments of the cultural diplomacy, because we are reaching out now to the most wide audience. The cinema, the movie goes to TV channels, to movie theaters, and that's the million viewer audience around the world. So if we want to communicate any messages, the most efficient way to do it is through the cinema. And the Ukrainian cinema is present everywhere in the world, throughout the world, and we have this Oscar since 2022, Olena Harnastai, get to the main context in Berlinale, and together with France, Generation Ukraine, France supported 12 movies made by Ukrainian documentalist filmmakers, and also there's quite another mark. Ukrainian movie received box office received quite appreciation on the market, and these projects have been implemented with the help of our international partners. Our partners, having realized that there was a full-scale invasion, they supported Ukrainian cinema makers, movie makers, and after almost 4 years, Ukrainian state returns as a partner, and as we've heard from our government partners, that this year will be allocated unprecedented financing for cinema, and the way in which we will move further, it's the question of strategy, and we've been working over this strategy over 1 year on the basis of Kyiv-Mohyla University and the international fund Renaissance supported this idea for the cinema industry. And what's important for us also is that we got support from our European partners. This is the form of cooperation where money could be used with maximum efficiency, because every producer, every film director thinks that it's their own film, their own movie, and so the movies will be promoted by co-producers in their countries, and that's the most effective instrument. Another step would be to create a system of diversified financial tools which will help to diversify movie cinema in different ways, so that it's not just the single source of financing, but we want to have different sources. And here I would like to mention the promotion, because creation of content it's one step, and in Ukraine there are, as of today, there are many important movies, but unfortunately they are under promoted. You know about most of them, but you haven't heard about many of them yet. And if we haven't heard about them in Ukraine, how can we count that people in the world, in other countries, will learn about them? So that's why the promotion, how Ukrainian content gets to the world viewer, is also important. That's very brief from me. You very well described what steps we need to do, where to channel investments, but where do you see Ukrainian cinema, Ukrainian movie in 10 years from now, if under favorable circumstances? What kind of success we are aspiring to? You know, what important is, and so that industry, and I speak about Ukrainian movie as industry, to become independent, because yes, we have an unprecedented situation when in Europe there live a huge number of Ukrainians live in Europe, and Ukrainian movies are successfully being broadcasted on TV channels and in movie theaters in Europe, and we need to take into account this factor and to scale it up, so that to promote this Ukrainian product also for European audience. And within 10 years perspective, I see that we make it a habit, so that in different countries people go to watch Ukrainian movies, to go to Ukrainian exhibitions, so that we become an inherent part of the cultural European code and the cultural code of the world. I think this is what we should aspire to. And also, on the other hand, Ukraine must be present in all large cinema festivals, TV channels, and here Ukrainian documentalist movie makers, they actually pushed forward this segment. Now I think we have the opportunity for another type of movie. Now that everyone heard about Ukraine and that there is interest toward Ukraine, and people want to learn what were the root causes of this fight, what was the foundation, what was the prehistory, the previous history that had led to this war. And I think that we need to work to make sure that our history becomes part of the cultural code of Europe and the world. You know, I watched in London the movie, and the room was half full, and I listened attentively to the reaction of the audience, and I found only two Ukrainian viewers, and so I was very glad. So it turned out that Ukrainian movies, they attract mostly British audience. We also had another case, Kuba Alaska, and it was in Belgium. And there were some cities where there was 90% of Ukrainian audience, but there were other cities where overwhelming majority of the audience was Belgians. And so I think it's very that's the result of our steps that we are doing to engage a European viewer to our content. Mr. Guillaume, my next question is to you, and we are now preparing and to plan on the 1st of December to launch a very ambitious program, the season of Ukraine in France, and this is a quite turning point in our bilateral relations. And 5 years ago, Ukrainian Institute carried out research about perception of Ukrainian culture in France, and as a result of that research were quite discouraging. In France, almost nobody knew about Ukrainian culture. They were very fragmented, usually negative connotations. And we know what was our starting point in France, and so my question consists of two parts. So, first one, how you see Dina, how do you see dynamic over the past 5 years, and the second part, how do you estimate the input of our cooperation, of our seasons, of our studies to change these dynamics for the better for the next 5 years? So let's talk about these 10 years, the 5 years before and 5 years after this season. So how do you see the presence of Ukrainian culture and its perception in France?
Thank you very much. First, I would like to apologize in advance if I make any mistakes or if, since I've arrived very recently here, so I'm a newcomer. A few things about the question you raised. Well, there have been a lot of improvements, of course. Ukraine now in France has, like in many countries, an image of courage, of resilience, and also, I would say, of capacity of adaptation, which is maybe the thing which is impressing the more people. Of course, even if, alas, it's in the field of war and capacities of war. But since culture is also a battlefield, you mentioned it this morning, culture counterattacks, I would say that this war maybe still has to be won in France. So the season, the Ukrainian season, which will take place in France, which is named A Trip to Ukraine, I would say could be a first step. It would be quite classical. It would be about all what culture can offer, and theater, documentaries, music, classical music, modern music, and to try to allow a kind of meeting point between the image Ukraine would like to send to France and the way French people see Ukraine. Since you've been, alas, a laboratory for many things here, my wish would be that we could manage to have also a laboratory for culture and for the image of Ukraine, and to try to see what could be your brand, your image. I would say the first thing which comes to mind would maybe be the colors of Ukraine. It's very striking, everybody can understand it, but then what else could it be? Coming back to diplomacy, to soft power, of course there are a lot of examples. South Korea is very frequently quoted. In the past we could have mentioned the panda diplomacy China had, Bollywood for India. So maybe this still has to be invented, to try to find something like a brand. You have an audience, so you have mass audience talking about movies. Maybe you should also try to explore mass movies, subculture, gaming. You're already doing it very well, I think, also with memes, which are working very well. So it's very broad. You have your diaspora, of course, on which you can count. And when I am talking about diaspora, I would mention also, because this is quite striking in France, some people remind that they have ancestors who came from Ukraine. For instance, I met a few days ago a French teacher in mathematics. He's 86 years old. He's a very high level mathematics teacher. And it's the first time he comes here. He will be spending 1 month to teach mathematics to Ukrainian students. And when I asked him why, of course there is the sympathy for Ukraine, but he also told me because I have ancestors who came from Ukraine. So this is particularly maybe in Europe, in France, something on which we could also rely on. Fashion. When you talk about French, you talk quite often about fashion, about design. I think this could be also a very interesting tool. Food. Food is part also of culture. So you have, you could have the honey of the Carpaths, your broderie, your ceramic. I'm afraid the French season will only try to launch some ideas, but then I would say that it's only a beginning, and that we will try to have together ideas with a lot of creativity to for the further steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Guillaume. We will work, and in 5 months, I guess in April 2026, after the end of the season, we will be able to assess how this picture, how this the perception of Ukraine in France, how it will change after the presentation of Ukrainian culture, because this is the record by scale. This is the record event for presentation of Ukrainian culture in a foreign country. In 2019, we had a project in Austria, and almost over 1 year there was a season of Ukraine in Britain, which we organized together with British Council. So we will see. We work a lot to plan and to implement everything. My next question.
If I may just add a word. To say that in France, people already have a lot of sympathy for Ukraine, so it's more about in-depth knowledge, about having a kind of brand. But to me, it's the global South towards which you should also concentrate your efforts, because there maybe the image of Ukraine still has to be built.
І дякую за цю ідеальну підводку до мого наступного питання.
Thank you. You brought me to my next question, because I wanted to pose a question to Mr. Sanjoy Roy, who is with us online. Mr. Sanjoy, greetings. And my question, thank you for joining us. And my question is, so Ukraine makes a lot of efforts to become more understandable and closer to India through the culture. First of all, when it comes to the Ukrainian Institute, India is a huge country with huge culture diversity, with very diverse communities who can have more or less interests to Ukraine. And my question, what, in your opinion, what are the best, the most effective ways to engage the audience in India to Ukrainian culture, to familiarization with Ukrainian culture, and how far we can make forward, what progress we can achieve in 5 years
everybody
from
who's
now?
in the room, my prayers, our empathy for the fight that you're fighting. Many of us in India are very supportive of everything that Ukraine is doing. But as you know, the geopolitics of this is so complicated especially with what's been happening in the United States, and therefore our support with Russia and the buying of the oil, etc. It's a complicated situation. When your war first started, when the invasion first started, your colleagues in the Ukrainian Institute had come to speak with me about how they can look to support from India. And my counter question to them was that India was not aware of Ukraine at all, because sadly, Ukraine and many parts of Europe don't necessarily look to the east. They look to the west for support, but they never really look to the east. So therefore, India didn't really know much about Ukraine. And it was only when the war started and we realized the number of students who were there doing medical studies in Ukraine, did it come home that there was a relationship that was existing between Ukraine and India. I remember in one of the things that I run, we're an arts organization and we run a number of festivals across the world, including a big literature festival, which is seen to be amongst the world's biggest, which is the Jaipur Literature Festival, which happens in the north of India, in a city called Jaipur in Rajasthan. But also we have editions across the world. And I remember in the very first year when the war broke out, luckily we had a very senior person, the wife of a person who ran an airline in India, who had just been to Ukraine. And she shared with us photographs of the before, of what Ukraine's built heritage was. And we were able to juxtapose photographs of what Ukraine had become because of the bombings and what had happened to some of the built heritage. Thereafter, we've tried to bring awareness to the issue around Ukraine and its culture through writing, through literature. We've hosted a number of writers, and that's always one way to be able to access any market anywhere in the world, have considered literature and language, both fiction as well as non-fiction. So you look at the history of Ukraine, which we in this part of the world don't necessarily know, and having just come back from the United States, where we have 5 different editions of our festival, let me also tell you that most parts of the West are unaware of Ukraine's history and heritage, both in terms of its built heritage, but also in terms of its very varied history over millennia. So that's one way that I would always suggest, that let the world know what is the history of the region, what is the art of the region, what is the music of the region. And certainly in India, because as you rightly said, we are so varied. We have, I think, about 170 cities which have more than 10 million people in each city. So you can imagine the size of it. We have, more than 1 million people in each city. Cities like Bombay and Delhi and Calcutta, we are 22 million in a city. So within the city itself, you can fit in, most of Europe, if not most of the rest of the world. So you have to approach India differently. Every part of India is different. The north is very different from the east. The east is very different from the northeast, which is very different from the south and the west. Within each of these regions, every 100 kilometers, everything changes. Our dialect, our language, the way we dress, what we eat. So one of the ways that Ukraine can look at engaging with India is people to people. So send in your puppeteers, your musicians, your dancers, look at collaborations. This is not the time necessarily to send a culture like a spaceship where they'll come, perform, and then go back. That doesn't allow for any kind of interaction. The only way to be able to build more understanding is through people-to-people interaction, through workshops, through collaborations, through conversations like just what we are doing. I would have loved to be part of your conference through the day, just to hear the ideas from Ukrainian people, your issues, the suffering, what has been happening. Each of you must have a story, and we know, we've been meeting many people from Ukraine, but till we hear those stories, how will you reach our hearts and souls and mind? And that's something that Ukraine needs to do. Not just Ukraine, both Poland and Austria are also represented here. We tend to sort of look at culture only from the prism of soft power. I would turn that around and first say, please look at it as smart power, not soft power. There's nothing soft about culture. This is about who we are. This is about humanity. This is about empathy. This is about the world we live in. It's about the environment. And one of the same things that we've been saying is that any war anywhere in the world, any violence anywhere in the world against any person is finally a war or violence against the only home that we collectively know, and that's the earth. So you may be fighting your lonely fight far away in Ukraine, or what's been happening in Israel and Gaza and the forgotten wars of Darfur and Afghanistan, everywhere. But everybody is impacted. And we will only understand the impact if we hear your stories. That's how we can empathize with you. So if you're able to send out many more artists and filmmakers and writers and puppeteers and musicians and allow them that wherewithal to be able to collaborate with musicians and artists here, perhaps take out to Ukraine photographers from India who'll tell us your story, who will travel and follow your war. That will bring home to us the situation that Ukraine is presently, but more importantly, the age-old tradition and culture that also Ukraine represents across millennia. You have gone through so many civilizational changes. This recent one is only recent, a blink of the eye as far as the world goes. But we need to know that. We need to understand that. We need to understand you as the people and culture and the arts and the way that the arts is able to get through a story and a narrative to each and every person, the way your kids can tell us their stories about missing their fathers, about their lives on, at the war front. That's what we need to know. And you can do this very effectively through poetry and writing and culture and tradition. That's what we need, the coming together of people, not just the export or import of creativity and culture.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sanjoy. I hope you could hear the round of applause right here in the hall, because we can feel this feedback and indeed we want to share these stories about us with the world. My next question is to Ms. Katalin, who is with us online from Austria. Austria occupies a unique place in the heart of all those who work in Ukrainian Institute, because since the first days of the work of Ukrainian Institute, the year Ukraine-Austria was a very important project, and so we've ensured then the biggest representation of Ukrainian culture in the world, and we've organized almost 200 projects in Austria. In particular, 40 of them were organized specifically by the Ukrainian Institute, and there were exhibitions, concerts, music shows, and our famous multimedia project based on Ukrainian stories, and we could see photos from it. It's been since 6 years since Ukraine-Austria Cultural Year, and in your opinion, what was the impact of this intense exchange, cultural exchange? How did it affect our relations in mid-term perspective, and how do we maintain these relations between Ukraine and Austria, and how they affect the support provided to Ukraine among the society in Austria?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon from Vienna. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor to be with you and to participate in your conference. As you mentioned, Austria is particularly committed to supporting Ukraine in the fields of arts, culture, and science. These efforts that you mentioned since 2019 have really substantially increased in the last years. For us, it is important to maintain our existing scientific and cultural network with Ukraine, but also to support Ukraine in its international cultural work. So let me just give you the context of how we work. So our support and our cooperation for Ukraine in the fields of arts and culture consists of 3 pillars. First, to continue our projects in Ukraine, but of course, since the outbreak of the war, our focus has changed. And so we are focusing now more on scientific cooperation, and particularly in the fields of human health, medical technology, psychotherapy, and so on. Then the second pillar is to increase the cultural visibility and cultural projects of Ukraine here in Austria. And here we have very good and close contact with the Embassy of Ukraine. And in this case, we also cooperate with the Office for Scientific Cooperation that used to work in Lviv. But since the outbreak of the war, our colleague is located back in Vienna. And so he helps us to organize a lot of events in Austria. And the third pillar of our cooperation, and this is now maybe the most important part for today's discussion, is our support for Ukraine's global cultural activities. This is working through the network of our embassies and cultural forums worldwide. And here we have realized in the last years numerous projects with Ukrainian artists at various places around the world. And this is also exactly the issue Sanjoy Roy talked about. It's the people-to-people contact. So we help to present Ukrainian artists, writers, musicians, visual artists through joint projects in our cultural forums and embassies. For example, this year we already implemented projects on one side in Europe, in our neighboring countries like Hungary, Slovakia, but also in Poland, where we have a very active cultural forum. But then we also have more exotic places like projects in Australia, a new project coming up in Vietnam, in South Africa, and also in Iran. I would like to mention an exhibition that we hosted in Iran. I'm very happy to inform you also that we continue to increase our financial funding for these kind of joint cultural projects. And here we are working closely together with you, with the Ukrainian Institute. We define jointly projects around the world. So this autumn, we are working also on projects in the context of the Ukrainian season in France, but also in India, where we will support Ukrainian artists. And then for next year, we have another list of projects coming up. And as Guillaume mentioned, I think it's, and we also are convinced that it's important that we support you in your visibility in the global south. So we are really happy to support you through our embassy and cultural institutes network, also in the global south. You asked me about the impact. It's always difficult to measure cultural impact. But I get back to Sanjoy. It's about each project, each musician, Ukrainian musician that goes abroad, each writer that can have a lecture and present their book, each film that is presented at a film festival, or at a cinema somewhere around the world. That is a success, and we are convinced that this is also how it works. This is also how Austrian cultural work abroad works. It's not through big initiatives and campaigns. It's each project, each artist that means a lot and touches the people in the host countries. And that's how you can build up a connection with the people around the world and present also your country as an independent and modern culture and country. So yeah, it's also getting back to Guillaume. Some say yes, culture is a soft power. Others say it's a hard power, and I like also that it's a smart power. You're absolutely right. I mean, culture is sort of the first victim in times of war or in dictatorship. So books are banned. Artists are not allowed to show their work in dictatorship. So actually, it's dangerous in certain times. That's why we have to fight for culture and to present culture. And we are very happy to support you also here in this joint project. Thank you.
Дякую, Katalin.
Thank you very much. We have one more speaker, Pavel. I know that there were some difficulties with the connection. Is he now with us? Can I ask him a question? Just minor troubles with connection. Then I will ask a question to Pavel, and you will have time to think about a work of art that impressed you. Pavel, of course, Ukraine and Poland have always had intense relationships, and that's something we are happy about, but we should always strive for more. How do you assess the prospects of Ukraine-Poland relations for the next 5 years? And in your opinion, how should we develop these ties between Ukraine and Poland?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this gathering. I'm truly honored and happy to be a part of it. Let me begin with a broader remark that Poland might well be the only or one of the very few countries in the world outside of Ukraine where Ukrainian culture can and shall thrive in its own language for the reasons we all know, we all understand. Then to answer your precise question, what it takes, my answer would be very, very simple and very, very concise. Leave the artists alone. Do not interfere. Do not play a political agenda. Just let the artists do what they do best. Invest, maintain, and capitalize on relationships of artists, curators, audiences. That's it. That's all it takes. Don't pretend to be a curator or over-curator. Be a doorman, be a humble servant. That's what it takes, at least, and believe me, there is hundreds of thousands of Poles who think the same way. But to make those relationships, to make them happen and to make them meaningful and to make them deep and profound, we Poles, we have to understand the following. First and foremost, this is not a war about land, because Russia has got 11 time zones. This is not a war about resources, because Russia has got a complete Mendeleev's periodic table shallow underneath the soil. This war proves us, culture professionals, that values, ideas, culture, and cultural relationships are the only truly critical infrastructure. That's what we Poles should learn from this war. And then to summarize briefly, to end up my brief remarks, is I would like to completely agree with Sanjoy Roy. There is nothing soft in soft power. not anymore. Thank you.
Дякую. Thank you, Pavel. I'm happy that we dealt with technical issues and we have just a few minutes to wrap up our event. So, Guillaume, are you ready to tell us about the work of art that impressed you, that you can recommend to your colleagues and friends?
Thank you. It would be poetry, translation of Ukrainian poetry. I was struck by the example which was given this morning about those poems which your embassy in Thailand was able to offer to Thai authorities, and then they were able to understand, to read. I was at the book forum in Lviv yesterday, and I had the opportunity to attend a conference on cultural diplomacy, but seen by authors, by translators. And one of them said that, yes, being able to translate in order to make more immediately understandable something is important, and maybe poetry is something which talks more easily to the hearts and the souls of people. So I would say poetry, but I wouldn't choose a particular, all the more that I know the title in French, but not in English, I'm afraid, but yes, poetry, and you have wonderful contemporary poets.
Дякую. Sanjoy?
Thank you. Sanjoy, can you share your impressions from Ukrainian works of art?
So in recent times, we've hosted two writers whose work I was very impressed with. One is Titania. I can't remember the full name of the writers, but I'll give it to you in a second if I can find it. But it's really through the writing, and so we had Titania Ziadovich. I think I've got the pronunciation wrong, and Oksana Luciashna. I'm sorry about the pronunciation, but it's really through their writing that we discovered Ukraine and everything about Ukraine. And I think much more writing like that is one way to be able to access your culture.
Дякую дуже. Katalin?
Thank you very much, Katalin.
Thank you. Well, there are so many impressive artists and books and so on. Just, for example, one project that was curated here in Austria, where Ukrainian artists that live now in Austria created their artworks here. So this exhibition was shown first in Austria, and we will help it now to tour around the world to be present at our cultural forums, for example. So this is a great project that is coming up. But also today, for example, there is the premiere of the latest film of Ina Shevchenko, Girls and Gods. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you.
Дякую. Pavel?
Thank you, Pavel. Did you hear the question I asked before about the work of art, a Ukrainian work of art that you could recommend to your fellow citizens, friends, and colleagues? He is probably no longer with us. Olha, have you something to say? Yes. I would like to say that we probably focus a lot on promoting Ukrainian culture and giving examples of our representation, but partnerships are always about movement in both ways. It's a two-way street, and it's important that works of art of our Polish, Austrian, Indian partners get to Ukraine, because due to the impossibility to travel and due to security constraints, we have fewer guests. But it's important to maintain a focus on their works of art, and we have to plan for the future so that books, exhibitions, and films of international artists are represented in Ukraine, so that we are a good partner for our international colleagues who have been supporting us. I guess we should not forget about it. Of course, because culture, it's about dialogue, it's about conversation, about mutual interaction. Thank you, Sanjoy. Thank you, Katalin. Thank you, Pavel. Thank you, Guillaume, for being with us today. Olha, thank you too. And we will conclude our panel discussion. We will move to the next part of our forum. Thank you for being with us.